we really appreciate both Mike Decourcy from Fox Sports and Anthony Cusimano from Veritas, our partner, being on today. So we're gonna learn a little bit today. We're gonna talk a little bit about how we got here in terms of. I'll try to do some comparative analysis of how technology plays into sports. I just told Mike, I'm a longtime technology guy, and we created ESPN 360. Even though you're not a sports guy, Anthony, you know ESPN 360, right?
I do know that, yes.
And then NFL, we did the NFL back in the day. So, but today we're talking basketball. It's not about football today or ESPN Sports. So, with that being said, just want a little bit of background on the company of NetX. We're a national systems integrator. We're based headquartered in New Jersey. I'm physically in New York. We have people all up and down the East Coast, and we cover the entire country. We have customers East Coast, Midwest, and West Coast. We've been in business for 25 years. Pretty proud of that. We just passed our anniversary the other day. So that's a tough thing to do in the technology field, to be around for 25 years, to have sustainability. And for those 25 years, we kind of have our roots in our partner Veritas, Symantec Veritas, right back in the day. But we have been a longtime partner Veritas, 15 years, and we've been a platinum partner. Platinum partner means that we have all of the certifications, both on the sales and the technical side, to basically be able to espouse the messaging that Veritas as a company has, and all of the different platforms that they make available. So we're very proud to have Anthony here from Veritas to talk about some of the latest technologies and how they've evolved. We cover all aspects of Veritas, and our specialty is in data protection. And data protection falls into the guise of ransomware protection because of all of the security hits that organizations are exposed to today. We're very concerned about that. So we've kind of evolved our portfolio to go beyond data protection. And we're also looking to do data migration to the cloud. You hear people talking about going to the cloud all the time, AWS, Azure, Google, all the usual suspects. But Anthony's going to talk a little bit about that and some of the latest technologies that Veritas has implemented to help you address those concerns you may have in evolving to the cloud. I think they've got a really good story around that platform. One last thing I'd like to point out is we're a national training partner. So we actually have the ability to train folks all across the country on all aspects of Veritas. And we'll have a link at the end of this presentation. If you want to learn more information about the company, you can do that. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce my good friend, Anthony Cusimano. Anthony and I used to work together. I love your two guys' titles, by the way, Solutions Evangelist and Bracketologist. I don't know how you guys pulled that off, but that's a great title, man. I tell you, I want to live like both of you guys. It's all good. But Anthony, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. It's an HR conversation. You gotta keep banging on their inbox, and eventually they'll give you the title you ask for. They wouldn't give me like CEO though for some reason. So I'll keep working on that one. But just a little bit about me. I actually have a couple slides I want to share with y'all. But before that, I'll do a quick introduction. I've been at Veritas 10 years, started back when it was Symantec era, and I actually started as a developer. So I was an engineer for 5 years writing code, actually something that ended up getting integrated into NetBackup, what became the modern user interface, which is now our web UI that I'm sure many of y'all have seen. But that was my baby for about 5 years. And once I finished with that, I went into sales, did some sales engineering, some national architect work, and where I found myself in the current role that I am. That was just because I was doing a lot of talks at conferences, and it made sense to kind of pivot me into that evangelist role. But it's been really cool to work at Symantec, turns into Veritas, or spins off as Veritas, because the history of the product, it very closely matches my own history, and that's actually it's one of the first things I'll show you in my presentation here. Is it okay if I share some slides real quick?
Please do. Please do.
Yeah. All right. So first thing I wanted to say was how on point you were with you called out specifically cloud and the cyber attacks, which if I could share my screen, that would be great. Because it aligns, I promise, I swear it does. Let me do this swap here, because I know you got the wrong one.
You're good.
There we go. Okay. So that aligns perfectly with our story. And if you had the opportunity to see our cloud launch event we did last month, we had Simu Liu there. I got to play some jokes on Simu. It was pretty fun. But the two major themes that are just running rampant right now is specifically multi-cloud and the cybersecurity cyber attacks from ransomware. And unfortunate due to the sort of global situation happening right now, the right column I think is just going to get worse and worse over time. But there is an awareness in the fact that these two pillars are the boardroom conversations that are happening today. All of our customers are interested in what's your multi-cloud strategy? What are you doing to protect against ransomware? So when we try to isolate and highlight the challenges that we're specifically building towards, it's cloud native, but not multi-cloud. So when you look at the native solutions out there, like the AWS backups, the Azure backups, one of the key challenges is they are located directly inside that ecosystem. And when you look at the multi-cloud offerings, they're not offering the cloud native speeds and feeds and capabilities that you would expect. So there's always a trade-off that was happening. So that was really the challenges we located in that multi-cloud space. And on the other side, there is the operational challenges that are creating these security gaps inside of organizations, specifically siloed operations. Whenever the team goes off and does their own thing, puts their data in their own repository, suddenly it falls out of line with the backup ecosystem. Suddenly it falls out of line with the governance and the things that should be happening to that data isn't. And what ends up occurring is teams get a little too much control. They have a little too much influence, and they go off and start implementing point solutions. The SaaS admin has his backup solution. The AWS admin has his backup solution, and then the on-prem guy and the Azure guy, you end up paying 8 times as much for 8 products that don't integrate at all. And when something actually goes wrong, it becomes a nightmare to get into that recovery mode. So these are the 2 challenges that I guess it's technically 4 challenges that we isolated here, tied to these 2 pillars. But like I said in my intro, it gets really interesting when you start to look at what we've done. So let's take a look at the NetBackup journey specifically. Where we started back in 8.3, this is when I was still a developer. Actually just coming out of development and moving into sales. We finished up some of the web UI work that we did. But what we did was we took NetBackup, which is a tried and true product that has existed for over 2 decades. And we really started firming up the modernization of how you interface with it, encapsulating everything we're doing inside of APIs. This was like the first groundwork to where we're going and where we got to today. Step 2 in 9.0 was to start containerizing these services and offering them in the Flex and the Flex scale form factor. Really being able to take the NetBackup that everyone knows and loves, containerize it, carve out those microservices. So now you can spin up, spin down, start to build that elasticity that you'll really see as we move along. And then in 9.1, we applied it to the cloud, really bringing the ability to scale how NetBackup operates inside this cloud space, be able to tune it to exactly the level of capability we need, leads us to today, which is our next generation architecture with NetBackup 10. So you may have heard of cloud scale technology. If you haven't, that's cool. I'll brief you through it real quick. But NetBackup 10 represents not just a large step in the evolution of the product, but it also represents the groundwork for where we're going next with 10 plus and autonomous data management. And that's the 2 things I'm going to just talk to you about today. So I promise I'll get through this in under 10 minutes. But to start with, let's just break down what is part of NetBackup 10. So to solve the challenges of those 2 pillars, we had to become more cloud optimized, meaning we had to offer that native type support for cloud vendors like AWS, like Azure, more granularity, more speed, more direct writing to S3 object lock type storage, Azure immutable storage. But we also had to increase the way we automate, because what we've seen even with our own customers is NetBackup is starting to be used by more than just backup admins. Cloud admins need access. Kubernetes admins need access. SaaS operators need access. So being able to automate not just the role-based access control, but automate how NetBackup starts to intelligently consume data and protect data. That's also a groundwork we've laid. And then the bottom right, obviously, this probably the most important part of everything we do is ensuring that no matter what upgrade we make, no matter what change comes to the product, our customers can always recover to a clean point in the case of ransomware and catch and identify and have a little bit of awareness when it comes to what's in their environment. It's critically important that we covered all 3 of these things, and they were all built into NetBackup 10 with some pretty great features. And I won't give you the line by line on exactly what we added where. I do have some call outs, but it's very easy to get access to this information. If you check out our Conquer Every Cloud page, we have some great resources that walk through each of these and what we've added. But to really talk about, I think the big upset that came with this release is cloud scale technology. So cloud scale represents an entire new way that we interface with cloud. Like we said before, NetBackup was not a cloud native offering in the past, and cloud scale seeks to address that specific concern. This represents an entire new architecture that we are building that basically is a combination of technologies and techniques. And what that ends up yielding is a whole bevy of ability that our customers have been asking us for years now. They were asking me for it when I was in sales. We couldn't deliver it in the past because we didn't have the architecture. Cloud scale utilizes each step you saw on that earlier graph to become that groundwork that allows us to deliver all of these things today. So everything you see here, the cloud native snapshots, the immutable storage, integrated SaaS protection, that's all in cloud scale today. And the reason why I call this a groundwork is because this is what we're building for tomorrow. It's the autonomous data management. So when we say autonomous, what our goal is, what our product management team is actively building and working on, is to take each of these individual parts and pieces and use them as a stepping stone to get to self-provisioning. We have the elasticity today. We can spin up and spin down NetBackup resources in a flex, in a cloud, in a flex scale environment. But what if we were able to do that intuitively? Even before you realize you need more resources or you need to set your tuning, we're able to provision more NetBackup resources or less based on the workload and the demand. That ties right into self-optimization, being able to look at the way we're operating, the way we're backing up technology, automatically shift, pivot, change the way we consume that data. And that same is true for self-healing, self-upgrading, and self-service. We want to make sure that every user in our environment never has a bad experience with cloud scale as part of NetBackup or NetBackup proper. So we're building new ways to make upgrades easier. We're building new ways to make so if there is an error, if there's an issue, we catch that before the user does. They don't have to call support. We're already on it. We're already working on it for them. And that's what this technology affords us. It's completely microservice based. It's a completely new code base web development offering that is part of NetBackup. You can deploy cloud scale from NetBackup in the clouds today. And it is that framework that gets us to that red box in the middle there. And the important thing is because of the way we've built this, this means that we can iterate faster, we can build quicker, and we can respond to changes in these environments with a lot more agility than we had in the past. So to kind of close out where we're going in the future, this is just a little quick walkthrough here. Is an application developer is doing a thing, whatever application developers do, whether it's managing 365, Salesforce, you name it, they have their data, and their data is automatically collected, it's discovered, and it's managed by artificially intelligent driven centralized protection policy. So the backup admin just says, hey, watch this space, and we're automatically taking inventory. We're keeping tabs basically on the important business critical data this application developer is generating. And from there, we basically are able to completely form fit what NetBackup needs to do to continue to protect that environment. So if it's a SaaS offering like N365, it means utilizing our NetBackup SaaS protection, which is now integrated as part of NetBackup 10 today. If it's Kubernetes, we're deploying our Kubernetes agent, or not even an agent, it's a KOps operator that's deployed as a Helm chart. We're able to interface in that environment. Or if it's cloud, we're using cloud scale technology to automate our implementation of that in an AWS infrastructure. We're capturing this data, and then we're backing it up. We're doing interesting things with it, like being able to put it into immutable storage. We're doing the 3-2-1 ransomware type, three data types, 2 media storages, and then 1 offsite. We'll be able to do all of these things on the fly without ever even prompting our backup admins. We're offering them the ability to get into these intelligent policies. And this is truly the future that we see. So, we're putting our foot down today with cloud scale and saying this is the first step. But this story here, this is where we see ourselves in the next 2 years. So it's a really exciting time to be at Veritas. It's a really exciting time to be selling NetBackup because the future is incredibly bright. And just having seen some of this technology for myself in action, it is definitely one large leap as opposed to just another iterative dot step along the way. So, and I was always told to put this slide in there just to highlight, some of our goodness, but it is always worth mentioning that we are the Gartner leader 16 times over now, and it is a good time to be at Veritas, and we're proud of what we've done. But that's it for me. I think I came in 30 seconds over 10 minutes, so Dang
Awesome
it, I
job,
reversed it,
Anthony.
but I
Thank you so
tried.
much. Appreciate that. And that slide is actually a very nice segue to bring up, Mike next because of the history of Veritas. Right? They've got a legacy. They've got a great reputation in the industry. A lot of the organizations use them because they're trusted. Right? And Mike Decourcy from Fox Sports, you're up next, and we trust your knowledge and your judgment, having been a sports writer for 20 years for college basketball. Welcome, and Anthony, thank you. And Mike, you're up.
Thank you.
Who's going to win the March Madness tournament this year?
Well, I wish I had the definitive answer to that. There's a lot of variables in a tournament like this with 67 games and 68 teams. But my selection for 2022 is Arizona. And the reason that I settled on Arizona is because I look at all these teams in this tournament, and unlike a lot of years, every team in this tournament has a significant flaw, with the possible exception, of Arizona, maybe Gonzaga. Gonzaga's flaws might be not significant, but could be crippling. Arizona is one of those teams that has maybe not a weakness at point guard, but it's not a strength. And point guard is the most important position on a basketball team. It's kind of like the quarterback in football, makes all the decisions, makes sure the ball gets where it needs to go, tries to stop the ball from going where it wants to go on defense. And that's one area where Arizona isn't superior. And the player that is in that position most of the time, Kirk Kriisa, has been injured. He was injured in the Pac-12 tournament, didn't complete the tournament, didn't play in the championship game, which Arizona was able to win without him. And what his status will be for this tournament still unclear. Although he was not wearing crutches on the bench on Saturday night when they won the Pac-12 championship over UCLA. He was wearing a boot of sorts, but he was able to stand, and so maybe the prognosis isn't bad for him. But I look at them as not the most dependable team in this tournament, more so the least undependable team. That's how I kind of define it. You look at a team like Kentucky, which has so much going for it. They have terrific guard play, probably the best offensive guard play in this tournament, with Xavier Wheeler as their point guard and Ty Washington, who is a point guard but plays off the ball. They play multiple point guards. That's great, but that makes you small on the perimeter, makes you easier to attack. And sometimes you can do that if you have a great defensive wing player, 6'7", 6'8" guy who can cover for some of that. They don't have that player. So that's their flaw. Kellen Grady, who plays in that position, has that size, but he's not very dynamic, not that quick, not a great defensive player. So they get into trouble with that. And that's an issue for them. Purdue, which has the most physically gifted player in college basketball. And when he walks across the NBA draft stage this summer, he'll be one of the most physically gifted players in the NBA, the highest level in the world. One of the top 2 or 3 most dynamic players that we'll see in the NBA next year, because his quickness, his ability to soar above the rest of the players on the court, his ability to change directions in a second, just an amazing athlete. So you have that, but you don't have a great point guard with him. So Purdue is flawed, and their defense isn't strong. They're one of the poorer defensive teams in this tournament. So I look at all of those, and it's easy to see that there will likely be chaos in this tournament. The teams that are favored will probably lose in a lot of circumstances. It's not easy always to identify which teams will be affected by that chaos, which team is the most vulnerable. I look at when a lot of people like to pick upsets in their tournament brackets. And I look at that and I say, okay, well, the first thing you want to do when you're picking your bracket, if you want to pick an upset, remember, basically picking an upset gives you bragging rights for a day. Hey, I had that team. I had UAB over Houston. I had that. Look at me. But in the average bracket pool, the ones that are basically, you get a couple of points for your first round, a couple more points for your second. The way the standard bracket is scored, it doesn't give you that much to make that call. Now, there are some brackets that weight toward seeding disparities. So if you can call that accurately, you get extra points, and those you would certainly want to be aware of making some of those upset picks. But remember, if you're going to take a team out that like a 5 seed Houston, you better be pretty sure that they're not going to hurt you on the other end. If they squeeze past in that game, or you're totally wrong and they dominate it, you have to be sure that they're not going to go on to the Sweet 16 or Elite 8 and keep stealing points from your bracket. So that's an important factor, and that's something that I always take into account. And in that case, I don't think Houston is strong enough to get past Illinois in the second round. So I think if I'm wrong about UAB and Jordan Walker, the terrific guard they have, if I'm wrong about them, I don't feel like it's going to come back to hurt me. I felt the same way in selecting South Dakota State to beat Providence. Providence is a wonderful team. Ed Cooley, their head coach, was our National Coach of the Year for Sporting News, and we were proud to select him. And one of the reasons we selected him is because we know how much talent he doesn't have. It's not a super talented group. They play hard, they play tough, they play together. They're really good in close games. They're able to rise to the biggest moments. But they have moments.
They're well coached, right, Mike? They're well.
Sorry.
They're well coached. That's
exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
But when they played against Creighton in the semifinals of the Big East tournament, on Friday night, they didn't have it that night. Creighton had a great night. They lost by 30. That's why I don't feel bad about saying, no, I don't think Princeton's going deep. If I'm wrong about South Dakota State, I think Iowa takes care of Princeton in the next round, because Iowa throws a kid out there named Keegan Murray, who is just an absolutely marvelous player, a beautiful player to watch. One of those guys that he's very tough, but you never see it. You know how sometimes you see in athletes, they need you to know how tough they are. Keegan Murray doesn't make any facial expression when he's out there. Whether he's scoring 30, which he did on Friday in the Big Ten tournament, or whether he's having a tough day, you never see a difference in his demeanor. He's just smooth and steady, but a wonderful player. So I think Iowa would take out. They would take out Providence if South Dakota State doesn't do it for me. So that's one tip. Another tip: don't get too caught up in the momentum that's created by a conference tournament championship. It could mean that the team is playing better and has found something. That happened in 2011 with Connecticut when they won 5 games in 5 days and won the Big East tournament. They did find something, and they ultimately won the national championship. But a lot of times it just means that they had a good 4 days, and they don't last very long in the tournament. If you pay too much attention to recency, you miss on something like UCLA a year ago. UCLA lost their final 4 games of last season, including their conference tournament appearance, and then went on to make the Final Four. There have been lots of teams that have won their conference tournaments and then flamed out. In the last 25 years, less than half the time, the NCAA championship was won by a conference tournament champion. So it's not a disqualifier, but it's also not a prerequisite. It can help a team. It can make no difference. It could tire out a team if they have to play too many games. You just don't know. But you need to see whether that team has something. I mean, Michigan in 2017, their plane on the way to the Big Ten tournament essentially crashed. I mean, they didn't get a lift off, and they ran into a field. Now, it didn't crash to the extent there was fire or anything, but they all got off, and they had to wait a day and go the next day and arrive the morning of the Big Ten tournament, won that tournament in 4 days, and then went out in the tournament, did very well, made the Sweet 16, could have made the Elite 8, just missed a couple of free throws or whatever, and they lose. So there is some value to it, but it's not an automatic, oh, they're hot, they're going to go places. And so be careful about falling in love with something that you see in that momentum. Another thing about conference tournaments, it's not that bad to lose, but you don't want to be one of those teams that seems to be completely lost it and lose early. Like Baylor lost in their quarterfinals to Oklahoma. I think it was a 2 seed versus a 7. Oklahoma did not make this field. They fell in that game. No team since 1993 has won the NCAA championship after failing to reach their conference tournament semifinals. Wow. So you can't be playing that badly, I guess, and feel comfortable about that team going on to win it. And one more general bracket tip I always like to point out, especially for the champion, and I believe the way the standard brackets work, you better be in the championship game, and it really helps to win it in order to win your bracket pool. Don't fall in love with a team because they're plucky and play together great and all that sort of stuff. That's all well and good, and it may advance you in a few rounds, but don't have that team as your champion. I see it all the time in brackets where people who are picking them fall in love with that team. Look at how well they played in the regular season. Providence would be a good example of that to an extent. Villanova, to an extent, is a bit of an overachiever. They play above their talent level. They don't have a long list of NBA players on that team. Colin Gillespie might play in the league because he's such a great leader, and he's a big kid for a point guard, and he's a very good shooter. But he's not going to be a first-round pick. He's not one of those guys who change games because they're so gifted athletically and skill-wise. He's a really good college basketball player. That doesn't win championships. Having 3 or 4 of those guys does, but you got to have somebody who's going to be a pro, somebody who's going to be drafted in the first round, preferably multiple somebodies if you can. If you got a couple of those guys, you've got a chance. Everybody who has one isn't going to win it, but no one who doesn't is going to win it. It's been 1987. Since 1987, every single team has won a championship. That has won a championship has had a first-round NBA draft pick on its roster, and in its rotation. It goes back to the last team that didn't was Indiana. Steve Alford was an all-time great college player, but was taken in the second round of the draft. They didn't have any first-rounders. They did win it. But since Danny Manning in 1988, most of the teams had guys like Danny, Bobby Hurley or Christian Laettner or Tyler Hansborough. Those teams, Anthony Davis may be the best example of 2012. You have that guy, he changes games. He won the NCAA tournament title game in 2012, Anthony Davis did, scoring 6 points in the final game because he so impacted the game as a defensive player and a shot blocker. So that you have to have those guys if you're going to win this. The more of them, the better. The more connected they are, the better. But if you don't have 1 or 2 of those players, you can make the Final Four, but you can't win those last 2 games. So that is, that's my open. Any questions that you have, you can unmute yourself, or Kevin can unmute you, or we can just take them out of the chat.
They're going to take them out of the chat. I think that's that. So if you have a question, type it into the chat. We do have one. This is Mike. Do you have UAB beating Houston?
Yes, I do. That's
right.
One of the upsets that I have. I really like Jordan Walker, UAB's point guard, who's both a dynamic scorer, 20 points a game, terrific setup guy, almost 5 assists. He's one of the best in a tournament which has very few. One of the interesting things about this season, very few capable point guards in this tournament. It's oddity. It's like having a college football playoff with not a lot of great quarterbacks. You don't see that very often, but it's just not a strong position for the college game this year. So having Jordan Walker is a key. There's nothing I don't like about Houston if Houston were Houston, but this is Houston -2, I guess you'd call them.
Yeah.
They had 2 terrific players who were injured back in December, lost for the year. They managed to right themselves well enough to win the American Conference regular season and tournament. But buried in that, under those 2 trophies, is the fact that there were only really 3 teams that had a shot at this tournament that were in the American Conference. Obviously Houston, they can't play themselves, and then there was Memphis, which is in the tournament, and SMU, which was one of the teams that came closest to making it but missed. And out of the 5 games they played against those 2 teams, Memphis and SMU, Houston lost 3 of them. I don't think a 40% success rate in your toughest games translates to success in this event. So maybe they win one. Maybe I'm wrong and they can find a way to beat UAB, but I think Illinois would get them in the next round. One of the reasons why I'm comfortable in selecting the Blazers to win that game.
So for the folks that are on the call, we just typed in the bracket. So we have an app where you can actually download your bracket. They can populate it, and then the top 5 winners will actually win a $250 gift card, which is kind of interesting, right? You know, it could be a little bit of planning, but also a little bit of luck. Luck does come into play here, Mike, right? I mean, that's just
For
part
sure.
of the mix.
Yeah, you got to be lucky. They got, I talk to coaches all the time about this. They'll admit they got to be lucky. You don't win 6 games without a little teeny bit of luck. You go back to Virginia in the Auburn game in the 2019 tournament. The last time we had a real, tournament experience with real fans in the crowd and all that stuff, traveling all over the country. There was a play in the Final Four where the ball got tipped out of bounds on a scramble, and it came down to which player's fingertip was seen knocking the ball out of bounds, and that saved Virginia. Saved them, and Virginia was saved in a prior game in the Elite Eight game because one of Purdue's players missed a free throw, who was an 80+% shooter. They fouled late to keep Virginia from getting a 3-pointer. Ball scrambled off on the free throw. The ball was scrambled in the backcourt, and they basically got lucky that Purdue was out of position defensively, and they were able to toss in a short shot to tie the game, force overtime, and win there. So you have to be very lucky to win the national championship, but you also have to be very talented, very together, very intense. You have a lot of really good qualities to win this.
So we got a good question here, Mike. LSU fired their coach at the end of the season. Can they regroup and with the interim coach in advance?
Yeah, Steve, what's interesting about this, it's basically not the same group, but LSU went through this in 2019. They actually had the exact same coach get suspended that time for the comments that he made and about giving a strong offer. I won't use the dirty word he used on this chat because I don't know what the FCC standard is, so I'll just use the word strong. And no one really ever knew what strong meant. Because he didn't specify, which is why he got to coach another 3 years. If he'd said what strong was, he maybe sort of might have been fired then. But because he left it nebulous, he coached 3 more years, made about $7.5 million more, but isn't going to get to coach in the tournament. Can they regroup? I have them beating Iowa State. Iowa State is really fading. They're talented enough to win that game. Kevin Nickelberry, who's taken over for LSU, is a guy who's coached a lot of games as a head coach. Howard, Hampton, about 10 years combined between the two. Had some good years, some not so good years. So at least he has some experience in doing this. I think they'll probably be beaten, though, by Wisconsin, which is, they don't have any issues. I mean, they have talent issues. They're not super talented outside of their All-American Johnny Davis. But I think they'll be able to keep themselves together well enough to win that game. So it wouldn't shock me to see LSU in the Sweet 16 because they are talented. But I think that any chance that they were going to make a long run, I think that the firing probably took that away.
Yeah. So I know the answer to this question. I'm going to ask it anyway because it's up here, right? So how about Kansas against Arizona in the final? Do you think that they have a shot?
I think they can. What bothers me about Kansas winning at that level is that they basically have 3 guys that they know what they can get from them. Jalen Wilson, who's a sophomore power forward, good defensive player, good finisher, makes a shot now and then. Christian Brown, who's developed into a prospect, has grown a bit as a wing, 6'7" or so, very good shooter. And then you have Ochai Agbaji, who's an All-American, tremendous offensive basketball player. They know that, and then it's basically, well, who's playing well today? And they have about 7-8 options for those last 2 spots. Who's playing well today? Who fits this matchup? I like that in terms of you have the ability to do that, and you have one of the great coaches of all time in making those decisions. That's a lot of moving parts, though, for a game against a team that's fairly solid, as I mentioned before, in Arizona. So can is a possibility, but I think if they play Arizona at that level, I just don't think that approach is likely to work.
Got it. So you and I were talking about this before the group came on. Why not Gonzaga? Gonzaga's always in the hunt, right? They'll get to at least the Sweet 16, but whether they advance beyond that, who knows, right?
Yeah, I like their bracket because the one thing that bothers me a little bit about Gonzaga, first, they are a little bit 3-point dependent. their perimeter players don't do much for their offense other than create opportunities by passing it inside or making open shots. They don't have a lot of in between from their guards and wings. That bothers me a little. They make up for that by Holmgren, Chet Holmgren. I don't know if we've discussed him yet. I don't think I did. You know,
No.
I have a fountain drink here on my desk. This is what Chet Holmgren looks like. He is the thinnest player I have ever seen as a successful major conference basketball player. 7'1". They list him at 190. Maybe he's 190, but I would have to see it to believe it. He is so thin, but he is so gifted. 7'1", handles the basketball like a point guard, shoots it like a shooting guard. He's tremendous. If you haven't seen him yet, because games are on late and all that, please make an appointment to watch him. You will see some things you've not seen before on a basketball court. I can tell you that. So they have that, but one thing that bothered me about them was Baylor just bouncing them around last year. Really physical approach. St. Mary's did the same thing, and they made Drew Timme, Gonzaga's All-America power forward, back down a bit in that game. So I like the bracket because none of the teams that they're likely to face have that. Maybe UConn to a little bit of an extent, but UConn is more a bunch of 6'5", 6'6" guys who are pretty tough, not those 6'8", 6'9", 240-pound guys. So I like that, but I think eventually, if I'm right and Gonzaga and Arizona play in the final, well, Arizona has that. That's what they are. They're great in the front court. Christian Coloco, their center, great shot blocker, knows how to hold his ground on defense. Tabellas, good, really skilled power forward with some muscle and some grit to him. So I think that that's why I didn't pick Gonzaga, because I think somewhere along the line, somebody's going to find a way to push them around. But the way Gonzaga could counter that would be to make threes. They weren't able to do it in last year's tournament. Matter of fact, I was sitting on Gonzaga's offensive end in the first half, and they got an open wing shot for their All-America shooter. And I'd seen their inability to get any sort of rebound. And I said to myself, if this ball does not go in, they have zero chance to win this game, because they had to get going from three-point range to counter the fact they couldn't get near the rim. Ball rimmed out, game was over. Yep. And then I sat there for 2 more hours and watched the rest.
All right, here's another one for you. Loyola Chicago. Can they get to the Sweet 16?
I don't think so. Because their second round game would be against Villanova. They can beat Ohio State. Ohio State's been injured. If Ohio State comes back healthy, it changes the chemistry of that game. We won't know for sure until they get out there whether Kyle Young will be available, how healthy Zed Key, who hurt his ankle late, will be. But presuming that they're in somewhat the same shape they were at the end of the regular season, Loyola has a great chance. But then Villanova is the second game. Yeah. And Villanova just too consistent, too perfectly coached, too tough mentally, I think, to fall victim to an upset like that. I think that Villanova would end Loyola's season if they were able to get the first rounder.
Yeah, I agree. I think Nova's going to be tough this year for sure. I think they're well coached. All right, next one. Toughest game to pick is Michigan State versus Davidson. Do you just take Tom Izzo this time of the year, or does Davidson have a shot?
Yeah, they say there's, the January, February Izzo is the way the months go. That's the line about him. What's interesting about that game is Davidson runs an intricate offense that's really well connected. It's beautifully designed. It gets a lot of open shots. If the shots fall, they're winning. I mean, they'll upset them. On Sunday, there's a young man named Foster Lawyer who plays for Davidson. He actually played for Michigan State for the first 3 years of his college career, struggled with the physicality of the Big Ten. The way Davidson plays protects him a little bit from that. And of course, playing in the Atlantic 10 don't face as many physical challenges as you would as a Big Ten player. So he had a great year, averaged 16.5 points and made second team All Atlantic 10. But they have now he's got to face his old coach, a lot of pressure, NCAA tournament. He did not play well in the Atlantic 10 championship game. And he got they ran the last play for him to get an open three to try to win the game, and he missed it. I don't feel good about him going in against Michigan State and having a great day. That's what I worry about. The way he handled the A10 championship, I think he was 1 of 7 from the field. It scares me if he's got to go in and that emotion and all that goes in against playing your former team. That scares me off the Davidson pick a bit.
All right, so here's a bracket throwing brick player here. You have Arizona winning it all. This is what we were talking about earlier, right? But they may need to get past Tennessee, and Tennessee beat them earlier in the year. What do you think?
Yeah, Tennessee's great. They're playing really well. I like that team. One of the things, I mentioned before about the point guard situation, it being so weak, so meager across the country. Not at Tennessee. They have a kid named Kennedy Chandler, who's some people have compared him to Chris Paul. He reminds you of Chris Paul physically. He's not. I think he's probably, maybe his NBA career. Well, if he had 85% of Chris Paul's NBA career, he'd be a multi-time All-Star. But he's not. He's not. If Chris Paul is a 10 on the 10 scale, then maybe Kennedy is an 8.8 or something like that. So he's not quite to that level of ability, but a lot of similarities in the way he plays. I love having that point guard on the team. I certainly could see Tennessee making the run to the Final Four. One thing that bothers me a little bit about Tennessee in that sense of trying to make a Final Four, their offense is not great, even with that great point guard. You're talking about the number 35 offense in college basketball, 36 in terms of what they produce per possession. And offense is what is the game in the tournament. It really is. You have to be good enough defensively to dictate some, and you have to be able to get that big stop. But the offense is what gets you through. The teams game plan so much for this. I mean, coaches basically for those 3 weeks, they give up their families, they give up sleep, they give up exercise, they give up human interaction, and they sit there and they look at every single piece of tape they can find. And they come up with game plans that are specific to that, as opposed to, in a regular season, you have a day to prepare, a day and a half, 2 days maybe. Now you're talking about at the start of the tournament, you're talking about you've got 5 days where you can go straight on. And if you get to the Sweet 16, that Sweet 16 game, same thing. And if you get to the Elite Eight or the second round where you only have that 1 day turnaround, I mean, they literally are going all night, and they are not stopping until they feel good about what they can do. So what you need is that player at that point who says, doesn't matter what you do, I'm beating it. That's why offense is so important, and that's why Tennessee makes me a little nervous, and I took them out at the Elite Eight level for that reason.
Yeah. So I think you answered this before, but the question is, how far do you see Villanova going? Do they get to the Elite Eight? Do they get to the Sweet 16?
I had them losing to Tennessee in the Sweet 16. I think size becomes a factor there. I think that that'll be an interesting point guard battle, because Colin Gillespie is playing his 5th year. He missed last year's tournament because he was injured, and he decided to come back. So you're basically playing against a near pro. Now, he would not, if he makes the NBA, and he may, it'll be as a end of the bench player, a substitute, and maybe he works his way up from there. But Kennedy Chandler, as I mentioned, is a future first round pick. So what wins out there? The significant talent of Kennedy Chandler, or the significant experience that Colin Gillespie has? I think that's an interesting part of it. I think the defense that Tennessee plays is much better now than when they played Villanova earlier in the year and were beaten badly. The front court, I think, goes to Tennessee as well. The freshman guards for Tennessee have come a long way. So I have Tennessee winning that game, but Villanova is a fantastic team. They have the best program culture in college basketball, and they are so well taught, so well coached. They don't make the mistakes other teams make because they're taught how not to. Jump stops, it's a simple thing, a silly thing that you would think. I mean, they practice it all the time, because why do you jump stop? Because then you don't charge. And so many players charge in big moments because they get overexcited and they want to be making that play. Villanova guys don't do that because they jump.
I think we lost.
I'm so sorry. Something happened, and I was lost you for a minute, but
you're okay. You're back. Back.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. All right. Here's an interesting one for you. The Blue Devils. What do you think about them? Their chances?
Yeah, one of the interesting things about watching Mike Krzyzewski coach up close over the years, I love this. He's got this. He's the best coach I've ever seen. Every one of the great coaches, Calipari, Calhoun, Self, Izzo, they all have like one thing they do better than everybody else. And what Mike does better than everybody is teach communication among his players on the floor. That they act as one so well over the years. And the way he describes it, it's a great little metaphor that he uses. You look at your hand, and of course there are 5 fingers on your hand, and that's how many the players are on a basketball team. So it works well for him as a coach. And think about the power that's generated when those 5 fingers are gathered as a fist, as opposed to separated with your open hand. And he uses that as a great metaphor for how his teams have to be together. Well, this year's team is more this than this. And maybe they're in between. And, you punch somebody like that and you're going to hurt your hand, right? That's how they are. They're not always together. I talked before about that point guard issue. They probably have it as bad as anybody. They've had to play. They have a young man named Jeremy Roach who's just not. He does his job and he plays hard, and every now and then he'll make a jump shot you don't expect. But he's not a great creator. He's not super great defending the basketball, so they often go other ways with that. They play a young man named Trevor Keels, who looks more like an NFL running back than necessarily a college shooting guard. But he's very good, but he's not a very good point guard. It's not what he's built to do. He's built to be a scorer who uses his physicality to attack. And so that doesn't work. And so sometimes they run their offense through Wendell Moore, their small forward. And that takes him out of what he does best. He's a great passer, a great facilitator, but now you're asking him to run the whole offense and to an extent be one of the primary options. So it doesn't all work for but they need to make some real progress in that area for them to be successful this tournament.
That's awesome. Awesome input. Do we have any other questions for Mike while we have them? I think we have exhausted it. So first of all, I appreciate your time. It's very insightful, very informative. All those folks out there that have been taking copious notes, you got to get your picks in by Thursday at noon. So Thursday, St. Patty's Day, if you're going to partake in the festivities, get your picks in early before 12. All good. Mike, thanks so much for your time. It's been a great pleasure to have you today, and hopefully we can do this again. And thank you all that are on the team's call. Appreciate you participating, and good luck. And I hope we get the 5 winners, and we can enjoy the March Madness as it begins.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.